You saved my child from drowning. According to our ancestors' law, you are now my husband. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.
Late afternoon pushed a quiet stillness across the land near the San Pedro River, the light flattening into long streaks that made every rock and brush line stand clear. Cole Merritt rode along the bank with the slow, measured pace of a man who had learned to keep his world small. His horse moved carefully over soft ground left behind by a week of rain, the wet soil sucking lightly at each hoofprint. Cole kept one hand resting loosely on the reins, the other on his thigh, his eyes fixed on the current with a tension that never fully left him when he was near water. He was 38, worn by work, and carrying more silence than most men could manage. 6 years earlier, he had lost his wife and newborn during childbirth, a loss that hit him so hard he considered heading east and disappearing entirely. Instead, he stayed on this piece of land his father once ran. Routine became survival. Fences, cattle, and repairs formed a thin wall between him and the memory of a life that had ended before it began. He avoided towns unless he needed supplies. He kept his circle tight and his speech tighter. Riding the river route was part of checking the lower fence line. Nothing more, nothing less. He leaned forward slightly, studying the water level. The river was low, but the recent storms made the current run faster. He noted debris from fallen branches caught against rocks. It meant he would need to mend sections of fence where runoff might have shifted the posts. He preferred to know the land's moods, and the river, in particular, kept him grounded because it reminded him that control was always temporary. That reminder hurt, but it also kept him careful. While Cole monitored the bank, Nayeli was half a mile upriver, moving with quick but cautious steps. She was 25, traveling with her 6-year-old daughter Asha after leaving a camp where she had lived temporarily with distant relatives. The arrangement had never been firm. Supplies were limited, tensions were high, and several men blamed her for the strain of sheltering another mouth. The decision to leave wasn't made out of pride. It was made because she saw hostility building, and she wasn't willing to wait for it to turn toward her child. She chose the river path because it kept them away from riders and allowed her to watch the land without drawing attention. Her mission was simple: reach safer ground, find a place where she could work, and keep Asha fed and out of danger. She carried only a small satchel with dried roots and a blanket, and she walked with the controlled posture of someone who had spent months anticipating sudden change. She knew how to hide fear from her child, but she hadn't eaten well in days, and she was more tired than she wanted to admit. Asha walked ahead of her, stepping on stones and trying to keep pace. Nayeli watched her closely, noting the slight wobble in her daughter's steps. She planned to stop soon and let the girl rest. The river seemed calm enough, offering the soft rush of water that normally made the world feel more manageable. Then everything changed in the space of a breath. Asha slipped on a wet rock, fell sideways, and the current caught her instantly. It wasn't deep, but the pull was stronger than Nayeli expected. The child's arms flailed once before the water spun her around. Nayeli shouted her daughter's name, sprinting down the bank, heart pounding so hard she felt it in her throat. She reached the edge, but hesitated for a split second because she couldn't see how deep it was or what rocks waited below. That half-second cost her. Asha disappeared under the surface. Nayeli cried out again, her voice cracking as she scrambled down the slope, sliding on her knees, grabbing at the mud. She felt the old fear she had been suppressing rise fast. Fear of losing her child, fear of failing her, fear of being alone in the world again. She yelled for help without thinking, her voice echoing across the water. Cole heard the cry before he understood the words. He dug his boots into the dirt and turned sharply toward the sound. He saw a woman running along the bank, her hands shaking as she searched the water, and then he spotted the small figure being carried downriver. He didn't ask questions. He dropped his hat, unclipped his holster out of pure instinct, and ran toward the edge. His chest tightened in a familiar, unwelcome way. Water had already taken enough from him, but hesitation here meant death. He forced those memories down hard and stepped into the current. Cold struck him like a blow, climbing fast from his legs to his ribs. The river pushed aggressively, threatening to break his footing. He kept his eyes forward, sweeping the water until he saw the girl surface briefly, her arms trembling and her breath barely catching. Cole moved toward her with controlled urgency, pushing off rocks, keeping his body angled to the current. His lungs burned, but he didn't slow. He reached her just as she slipped under again. He lunged forward, catching her arm, then her waist, pulling her against him while she coughed weakly. His shoulder slammed into a submerged stone, sending pain up his side, but he kept going, turning his body to shield her from the current. Each step felt heavier as the water tried to drag them both backward. Nayeli watched from the bank, her fear sharp enough to make her dizzy. She could see the effort in Cole's movements, the way he kept the child's head high even while the current shoved against his legs. She moved along the rocks as he approached, not caring that her hands scraped against rough stone. Cole reached the shallow edge and lifted the girl higher, water pouring off them in steady streams. He handed Asha to her mother and stepped back slightly, breathing hard. His shirt clung to him, dripping cold water, his jaw tight as he tried to steady his breath. Nayeli knelt beside her daughter, pressing her palms to the girl's chest and cheek. Asha coughed water, then started to cry softly, her small frame shaking in her mother's arms. Relief hit Nayeli so suddenly that she had to close her eyes for a moment. Her hands trembled as she held the child close. Cole watched them both quietly, feeling adrenaline slowly drain into a heavy ache across his ribs. His mind replayed the moment he saw the girl disappear under the water, and he felt the familiar sting of old loss. But this time the ending was different. This time he had reached someone in time. Nayeli looked up at him. Her breathing was unsteady, but her expression calmed with deliberate control. She took Cole's hand without hesitation and placed it gently over her daughter's chest. Her touch was steady, almost ceremonial. "You saved her life," she said. "By the law of my ancestors, this makes you my husband." Cole blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. He stepped back slightly, confusion wrestling with the shock of what she had just declared. Her tone wasn't emotional. It wasn't pleading. It was factual, spoken with the weight of something she had known since childhood. I didn't expect," Cole said, stopping because he didn't know how to finish the sentence. Nayeli held his gaze. "This is not something forced. It is a truth. A child's life binds the one who saves it." Asha pressed her face into her mother's shoulder, exhausted and cold. Nayeli lifted her gently, adjusting the child's weight so she could stand. Cole wiped water from his face with the back of his sleeve, feeling the chill settle into his bones. He tried to make sense of the woman's words, unsure how to react without disrespecting the belief she clearly held deeply. Her posture was strong despite her exhaustion, and he could see she wasn't using tradition as leverage. She was explaining something ancient and unbending. "You're home," she said quietly. "Is it close?" Cole nodded. "Less than a mile." "We will follow," she replied. Her voice held no fear now, only steady resolve. Cole brought his horse closer and lifted the child into the saddle. Nayeli climbed up behind her, holding Asha securely. Cole walked at their side, guiding them across the land. He glanced at Nayeli once, noticing the way she watched the surroundings even while holding her daughter close. She was alert, disciplined, and exhausted in a way she would never admit aloud. As the cabin came into view, Cole felt a shift inside him that he couldn't identify. Maybe it was responsibility. Maybe it was the weight of what she believed. Maybe it was simply the sight of a child who might not have survived if he had hesitated. Inside the cabin, Cole built the fire quickly. The flames caught the wood, giving off enough heat to warm the air. Nayeli knelt beside the hearth and placed Asha near the fire, gently rubbing her daughter's hands to bring warmth back. Cole brought a blanket and draped it around the child. He watched the small girl's breathing slowly even out. A tight pressure in his chest eased slightly. When Asha finally slept, Nayeli turned toward him. Her voice was calm again. "My name is Nayeli," she said. "My daughter is Asha." Cole nodded. Cole Merritt. She studied him in silence, then spoke again. Why, I said at the river, it is not meant to burden you, but is something I cannot ignore. Cole didn't respond immediately. He looked at the child, then back at Nayeli. He didn't want to step into anything he couldn't uphold, but he also didn't want to dismiss a belief that carried meaning for her. You both can stay here tonight, he said quietly. Warm up. Rest. Nayeli bowed her head in acknowledgement. The fire crackled softly, filling the room with steady light. Cole stood near the wall, unsure where this path led, but aware that the river had pushed their lives together in a way none of them had planned. Nothing was resolved yet, but the beginning had already taken shape. The cabin walls held the warmth of the fire long after dusk settled over the land, the glow stretching across the floorboards in slow-moving flickers. Cole stood near the table, arms crossed loosely over his chest as he tried to settle the tightness in his ribs from where the river had slammed him against a submerged stone. His shirt had dried unevenly, leaving cold patches that clung to his back. He didn't move much. He didn't want to draw attention to the aches spreading along his side, especially when the woman and her child needed the space more than he needed comfort. Nayeli sat on a folded blanket near the hearth with Asha asleep against her lap. The girl breathed steadily now, small hands curled near her chest. Nayeli's movements were sharp but careful, every gesture shaped by exhaustion and the instinct to protect her child even while resting. She kept one palm on Asha's back, checking the rise and fall of her breathing without thinking about it. Cole watched them from a respectful distance. He didn't want to intrude, yet he found himself unable to look away entirely. The steadiness Nayeli showed earlier had shifted now that night had taken hold. Her shoulders lowered slightly, revealing the toll of the day. She looked around the cabin as if memorizing the room, not suspiciously, but with the gaze of someone who had learned never to settle unless she understood her surroundings. Cole cleared his throat quietly. If you need more blankets, there are some in the chest by the wall. Nayeli looked up, her expression composed, but her voice soft. This is enough. She is warm. Cole nodded and stepped toward the stove to check the pot of broth he had set earlier. It simmered gently. The scent filled the cabin, a simple reminder that some things could still be done right even when the world turned unexpected. He ladled broth into a tin cup and placed it near Nayeli, not too close, allowing her to decide whether she wanted it. She studied the cup, then lifted it carefully. Her hand shook slightly, the tremor she had controlled all evening now pushing through fatigue. She masked it quickly by adjusting her grip. "Thank you," she said, each word even. Cole leaned against the table and kept his voice steady. "If she wakes hungry, there's bread. It isn't fresh, but it's good enough." Nayeli nodded, glancing down at her daughter. In the shifting firelight, Cole noticed something new in her expression. Not fear, not uncertainty, but calculation. She was planning what tomorrow might require, weighing possibilities, trying to determine whether this place could shelter them even for a short time. Cole understood that look because he had worn it himself after his own loss. It was the expression of someone who survived by planning 3 steps ahead, expecting trouble because experience had taught them that trouble never announced itself politely. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The room was quiet except for the fire settling in the hearth and the soft whistle of wind pushing against the boards. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was a shared one. Eventually, Nayeli shifted slightly, careful not to disturb Asha. "You live alone?" she asked. Cole hesitated. Personal questions were something he avoided, but she asked with a tone that wasn't prying, just seeking clarity. "Yes," he said. "Been that way for years." "Your family?" she asked, her voice calm, not demanding more than he was willing to give. "Gone," he answered simply. He didn't add details. He didn't need to. The word carried enough weight on its own. Nayeli accepted the answer with a small nod. She didn't offer her own history, but the tired set of her features suggested she carried losses of her own. Cole didn't push. He respected people who spoke only when necessary. Asha stirred slightly, shifting her face against her mother's dress. Nayeli soothed her with a soft hand over her hair. When the child settled again, Naeli straightened her back and met Cole's gaze with a steadiness that made him draw a slow breath. "What I said by the river," she began, "I know it is foreign to you, but it is not something I can take back." Cole didn't move, but his jaw tightened slightly. "I understand the weight of responsibility. I'm not dismissing what you said." Naeli watched him carefully. "I do not expect you to accept the bond tonight, but the law is part of me. It guides what I must honor." Cole shifted his stance, feeling the familiar discomfort of being pulled into something he hadn't chosen. Yet he couldn't bring himself to resent her for it. She wasn't trying to trap him. She was explaining the truth she lived by. "You and your daughter are safe here for the night," Cole said. "Whatever comes next, we can talk about it in the morning." Naeli didn't smile, but something eased around her eyes. "That is enough," she said. Cole brought an extra log to the hearth, placing it gently so the fire continued burning through the night. He noticed Naeli watching the movement carefully, as if evaluating his intentions through the smallest actions. She wasn't skittish. She was observant. That difference mattered. He stepped away and began preparing a bedroll for himself on the far side of the cabin. He didn't want her to think he expected anything from her or her daughter. He kept his distance intentionally, showing her that this space was hers to use without conditions. Naeli traced the edge of the blanket around Asha with a slow hand. Cole saw the tightness in her shoulders as she adjusted her posture. She wasn't used to relying on anyone. She didn't trust quickly, but she didn't show fear either, only the caution of someone who had been pushed from too many places. "Tomorrow," Naeli said, her tone neutral but firm, "I will tell you everything. Why we left, who might come looking, what danger we carry." Cole nodded once. "I'll listen." "You have that right now," she added, voice low, "whether you wanted it or not." The fire crackled softly, sending a warm glow across her face. Cole saw the exhaustion finally catching up to her. Her eyelids lowered slightly, her breath steadying into a slow rhythm, but she didn't lie down. She remained upright, guarding Asha even in rest. Cole lay on his bedroll, but kept his eyes open longer than usual, listening to the faint sounds of the night pressing against the walls. He felt the presence of others in his home for the first time in years, and it stirred something he hadn't expected, a cautious awareness mixed with a strange sense of responsibility. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring or whether Naeli's words by the river would shape his life. But as he watched the fire ease into steady embers, he understood one thing clearly. This wasn't a temporary interruption. Something had shifted the moment he stepped into that river. A thin gray light crept through the cabin's small windows as dawn pressed gently against the horizon. The fire had burned down to quiet embers, casting only a faint warmth across the room. Cole woke to the soft rustle of movement near the hearth. He blinked once, steadying himself before sitting up. His ribs protested with a sharp ache from where the river had slammed him into stone, but he ignored it and waited for his breathing to settle. Naeli was already awake. She sat with her legs folded beneath her, smoothing her daughter's hair with slow, measured strokes. Asha slept deeply, her face calm in a way that had been impossible the night before. Naeli's posture remained watchful despite her fatigue. She kept her eyes on the sleeping child, but the subtle tension across her shoulders suggested her mind had been awake for hours. Cole stood quietly, adjusting his shirt. The morning chill clung to the floorboards, and he could see his breath faintly in the dim light. "I'll get the stove going," he said in a low voice. Naeli looked up, giving a brief nod. She didn't speak yet, but her attention followed his movements as he added kindling, struck a match, and coaxed the flame to life. The stove began to warm, soft pops echoing through the small space. Asha stirred, rubbing one eye as she pushed up slightly. Naeli leaned closer, whispering something gentle in her own language. The girl blinked toward the fire, then toward Cole, studying him with cautious curiosity. She didn't cling this time. She simply watched him, as if trying to understand why he had been there when the river pulled her under. Cole offered a small, steady nod. Children didn't need long explanations. They measured people by action, not words. He reached for the pot from the night before, reheating the broth. "She should eat as soon as she can," he said. Nayeli shifted Asha onto her lap, supporting her back with a careful hand. "She will," she answered. Her tone held quiet gratitude, though she didn't speak it directly. Her people did not rush to show emotion, and Cole respected that. Cole placed the warm broth in front of them and stepped back again. He didn't want her to feel pressed. Asha sipped slowly, pausing after each swallow as if testing whether her stomach would accept it. Nayeli kept her palm against her daughter's back, steadying her breath with gentle touches. After a few minutes of silence, Nayeli lifted her eyes to Cole. "I told you I would explain today." Cole pulled out a chair and sat, leaning forward slightly with both hands resting on his knees. "I'm listening." Nayeli adjusted her blanket around Asha and began with deliberate calm. "We left a camp 2 days ago," she said. "It was a place we stayed only because we had nowhere else to go. Supplies were low. Tempers were worse. A man there decided I was trouble. He made it clear we should leave." She paused, her jaw tightening briefly. I did not wait for him to speak twice. Cole studied her expression. She wasn't telling him every detail, but she wasn't hiding the truth either. "Did he follow you?" "Not first," Nayeli said. "But he wants power, and he does not allow anything he believes is his to walk away." Cole's fingers tightened against his knee. "You think you belong to him?" Nayeli gave a small, restrained breath. "Men like him believe a woman traveling alone is something they can claim. I refused him. He will not forget it." Asha set down her empty cup and leaned against her mother's side. Nayeli smoothed her daughter's hair again, her fingers steady despite the tension building beneath her calm tone. Cole absorbed the information silently. He didn't need more details to understand the danger. A controlling man with wounded pride was a threat that traveled quickly across land. Men like that gathered others who believed the same way. Nayeli continued. "The river path was the safest place to walk unseen. I thought we would reach the crossroads by midday and find work. But the storms made the bank unstable. I misjudged one step." She looked down at Asha, her voice dropping to a quiet rasp. "And my daughter paid the price." Cole shook his head slightly. The current was fast. Anyone could have slipped there. Nayeli didn't contradict him, but her expression showed she blamed herself more than the water. She carried guilt in the same way Cole carried grief. Heavy, controlled, and constant. After a long pause, she added, "When I said what I said yesterday, I was not trying to trap you." Cole held her gaze. "I know. It is a law I was raised with," she explained. "A child's life is tied to the one who pulled them back. In my people's eyes, it is a bond that cannot be ignored." She watched him carefully. "But I do not force this on you. You must decide what you honor." Cole felt no irritation, only the weight of responsibility settling deeper. "I take responsibility seriously," he said, "but I won't make a choice in one night about something that big." Nayeli nodded. "That is fair." Asha yawned and lay across her mother's lap. Nayeli shifted her gently, then looked toward the window. The sky outside brightened to a pale blue, signaling a day that would require decisions whether they wished for them or not. Cole stood and reached for his coat. "I need to check the north fence. Storm might have pulled a few posts loose. You two can stay inside. The latch holds well." Nayeli traced her thumb along Asha's cheek. "You trust us here?" "If I didn't," Cole said plainly, "you wouldn't be inside my home." Nayeli accepted that answer with a quiet dip of her chin. Her eyes warmed for only a moment before the guarded discipline returned. Cole stepped outside into the cold morning air. The land stretched quiet around him, the smell of damp soil rising from the ground. He scanned the ridge automatically, habit guiding his eyes to places a man on horseback might appear. Nothing moved. No dust trails. No distant silhouettes. For now, they were safe. Inside, Nayeli watched the door close, then looked down at Asha, who had finally relaxed completely against her. She whispered her daughter's name softly, letting the relief of the moment settle. Cole walked a few paces toward the pasture, but his mind stayed in the cabin. The woman's honesty had stirred something he didn't know how to name yet. He wasn't afraid of responsibility. He feared failing at it again. As he reached the rise, overlooking the fence line, he stopped abruptly. Hoofprints cut across the soft ground, fresh, deep, and heading toward the river trail. He crouched, examining them closely. 3 riders, moving fast. Within hours, Cole straightened slowly, jaw tightening, knowing the truth he had been avoiding since last night. Danger wasn't coming someday. It was already here. Cole followed the line of fresh hoof prints with slow, deliberate steps, keeping his breathing steady while the morning sun rose behind him. The soil was still damp from recent storms, making every impression clear. The riders had passed less than an hour earlier, moving in a tight formation. The spacing of the prints told him they weren't herding cattle or seeking grazing land. They were searching for someone. His pulse tightened. He turned his gaze toward the river trail where Nayeli and Asha had walked the day before. The riders' tracks angled in that direction, then cut sharply upward toward the ridge overlooking his property. They weren't passing through. They were watching. A quiet cold settled across Cole's spine. He forced himself to breathe slowly as he walked the perimeter. Years of living alone had trained him to recognize when danger wasn't a possibility, but a certainty. He wasn't dealing with travelers. He was dealing with men who followed a trail with purpose. When he returned to the cabin, he paused at the door to compose himself. He didn't want to bring panic into the room, especially with a child recovering. He pushed the door open with measured calm. Inside, Nayeli sat beside the hearth with Asha tucked against her hip. She looked up immediately, sensing something in his posture that he had tried to hide. Her eyes sharpened with controlled awareness. "You found something," she said. Cole closed the door gently behind him. 3 riders passed close to the ridge. Fresh tracks. They were headed toward the river, then circled back. Nayeli's jaw tightened. "It is him." Cole didn't need further explanation. The tension in her voice was enough. He stepped closer, lowering his tone. "Tell me what kind of man he is." Nayeli adjusted her daughter so the child's head rested in her lap. Asha had drifted into a light doze, unaware of the shift in the room. Nayeli kept one hand on her daughter's back before answering. "He does not let women leave him," she said. "Not because he cares, because leaving him means he loses control. Men like that build their pride on owning others. If he followed, he will not stop." Cole nodded slowly. He had met men like that during his years drifting after his wife's death. Men who created problems wherever they rode and blamed everyone else for the consequences. They were predictable in their cruelty. "What does he want from you?" Cole asked. "Obedience," Nayeli said with steady firmness. "He wanted to decide where I walk, who I speak to, how my daughter grows. He saw us alone and believed that made us his responsibility. I told him no. That was enough to make him an enemy." Cole considered her words carefully. She wasn't exaggerating. She was laying out facts she had carried alone for too long. He crouched near the table, checking the rifle leaning in the corner. He didn't load it openly. He didn't want Asha to wake and see fear in the room, but he needed to know it was ready. Nayeli watched him quietly. "You owe us nothing," she said. "What follows us is not your burden." Cole looked at her without flinching. "You're under my roof now. That makes it my concern." Asha stirred at the sound of their voices. Nayeli brushed a hand along her daughter's cheek, calming her before she fully woke. The child relaxed, slipping back into sleep. Cole stood and stepped to the window, scanning the distant hills. The land was quiet, but silence could be deceptive. He had learned that the hard way years ago. Storms always built before they broke. Nayeli spoke again, her tone even but heavy. "He travels with 2 others. They follow his orders. They do not ask questions." Cole turned toward her. "How close do you think they are?" "If they found the trail along the river, they will not be far," she said. "He will keep searching until he finds a sign that confirms we passed here." Cole understood what that meant. Tracks near the river were unavoidable. The riders would see footprints, disturbed mud, signs of someone climbing and falling. They would follow instinct as much as logic. Nayeli lifted her chin slightly. "If you send us away, we will go. You do not have to stand between us and danger." Cole walked closer, stopping a few feet from her. "If you leave now, you'll run straight into them. They're searching the area. Staying here buys time. Leaving puts you in their hands." Nayeli lowered her gaze to Asha. The decision weighed on her, but the truth was unavoidable. "Then what must we do?" Cole took a breath, thinking it through. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't a hero in the foolish sense. He was a man who calculated risks and acted only when needed. "I'll fortify the north side and check the ridge again," he said. "They might circle back before noon. We need to be ready." Nayeli set her hand on the floor, steadying herself as she rose slowly. "I will help. Asha needs you close," Cole said. "Let her rest while you can." Nayeli looked at her daughter, then met Cole's eyes again. "She sleeps better when I know what stands against us. I cannot sit idle." Her voice held a firmness that wasn't defiance. It was necessity. Cole respected that. "All right, then we do this together." Nayeli wrapped Asha in a blanket and placed her gently on the bed. The girl curled on her side, small breaths steady and even. Nayeli checked her once more, then stood with quiet resolve. Outside, the air held a crisp bite. The wind swept across the field, carrying the scent of wet earth and distant pine. Cole walked ahead, leading Nayeli toward the north line where the tracks had been clearest. Nayeli studied the ground with sharp precision. She knelt near the deepest impression, touching the soil with 2 fingers. Heavy horses. Fast pace. They were following a trail, not exploring. Cole nodded. They rode with intention. Nayeli rose, brushing her hands clean. He is impatient when challenged. He will push harder today. Cole scanned the ridge again. The land stretched quiet, but he felt the pressure of unseen eyes. Years of solitude had sharpened his instincts. "We'll add cover near the cabin," he said. "Stack wood. Move the cart closer. Anything that slows a direct approach." Nayeli followed him back toward the house, her steps steady. She was not fragile. She had endured more than she showed, and Cole could see that in the way she scanned the horizon, in the way she held her breath for a moment before letting it out slowly. She understood danger because she had lived beside it for too long. They spent the next hour reinforcing weak points around the yard. Cole lifted heavy planks while Nayeli arranged them with swift hands. She tied knots with practiced skill, her movements efficient and controlled. She wasn't unfamiliar with preparation. She had been the protector of her daughter long before reaching Cole's land. At one point, Cole paused to catch his breath, the ache in his ribs flaring. Nayeli noticed the strain immediately. "You were hurt yesterday," she said. "The river struck you." "It's nothing," Cole replied. "Pain slows judgment," she countered quietly. "You need to breathe deeper." Cole looked away, uncomfortable with being seen so clearly. Nayeli wasn't accusing him. She was stating a fact. "I'll manage," he said. She studied him for another moment, then nodded. She didn't argue. She understood the pride of someone who had relied on his own strength for too long. As they finished securing the north side, Asha appeared in the doorway, wrapped in the blanket, blinking against the morning light. Nayeli walked toward her immediately, kneeling to check her temperature and touch her cheek. Asha pointed to the yard. "Mama, what are you doing?" Nayeli brushed the child's hair aside. "Keeping us safe." Cole approached slowly, so he wouldn't startle her. Asha looked at him with wide, careful eyes. She didn't hide behind her mother this time. She seemed to remember him pulling her from the river, though she didn't say it. Nayeli lifted Asha into her arms, steadying the girl's legs. "We must finish this quickly," she said to Cole. "They're close." Cole scanned the ridge again, a new heaviness settling across his shoulders. He wasn't just protecting strangers now. He was protecting a woman who spoke honestly and a child who had nearly slipped out of the world before she had lived 6 full years. "We'll be ready," he said, his voice low but firm. Nayeli held his gaze for a long moment. For the first time since yesterday, her expression softened, not in weakness, but in trust forming quietly beneath the surface. The sun climbed higher, sharpening every shadow across the ground. They both knew the riders would not stop searching. And the moment they found the trail leading to Cole's ranch, there would be no time left to prepare. By midday, the wind carried a sharper edge, sweeping through the cottonwoods and sending loose twigs across the dirt yard. The sky held a flat, pale tone that often came before trouble. Cole stepped onto the cabin's porch and paused, scanning the northern ridge once more. His eyes narrowed as he spotted faint dust lifting in a thin, uneven line, too concentrated to be natural wind, too steady to be passing wildlife. Riders. They hadn't committed to a full approach yet, but they were testing the high ground, circling slowly, waiting for a sign. Cole's stomach tightened with controlled tension. He didn't panic. He simply shifted into the mindset he used during difficult years drifting from job to job, when he had no one to rely on except his own judgment. He went back inside, closing the door with measured quiet. Nayeli stood near the table, adjusting the folds of Asha's blanket. The child nibbled a piece of stale bread, her small shoulders relaxed but her gaze alert, as though picking up on her mother's mood. Nayeli looked up immediately. She didn't ask a question. She saw the tension in Cole's expression. "They are closer." "Yes," Cole said. "They're on the ridge." Nayeli exhaled slowly, steadying her breath. She picked Asha up and settled her on her hip, instinctively placing her body between the girl and the door. Cole watched the movement and recognized it as the behavior of someone who'd been forced to anticipate danger for too long. "We have to decide how to handle this," Cole said. His voice carried calm authority, but the weight behind it was undeniable. Nayeli nodded. "He will not knock. He will not speak first. He will ride in and claim he has the right to take us." Cole stepped closer. "He won't take anything from this place." Nayeli studied him, trying to measure how far he was willing to go. She didn't see aggression in him, but she saw resolve. Cole moved to the window and looked out again. "If they come down, they'll try to surround the cabin. The land's too open to hide tracks." He turned back toward her. "Do you trust me enough to follow my lead?" Nayeli's grip on Asha tightened for a moment before her shoulders dropped with a quiet, resigned calm. "You saved my daughter. I trust that you want no harm for us." "I don't want trouble," Cole said. "But I won't stand aside either." Nayeli set Asha down, brushing her fingers through the girl's hair. "Tell me what you need." Cole appreciated the directness. He didn't have to convince her. She simply wanted clarity. "We keep the doors barred," Cole said. "If they want a confrontation, it'll be on my terms. I'll talk to them outside, away from you and Asha." Nayeli's jaw tensed. "He will insult you. He will threaten you. He believes fear makes others useful." Cole gave a faint, humorless breath. "Men like him don't scare me. I've met worse." Nayeli watched him closely, then gave a single deliberate nod. "I will stay with her. But the moment things shift, I come outside." Cole lifted a hand slightly. "If things shift, you keep Asha inside. That's why we're preparing." Nayeli wanted to argue. He could see it in the way she inhaled, but she didn't. She swallowed whatever protest rose in her throat and nodded again, slower this time, accepting his reasoning. Asha tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mama, who is coming?" Nayeli knelt so she could meet her daughter's eyes. "Just men who are lost," she said gently. "We will stay in the house. Cole will talk to them." Asha turned toward Cole with a small, uncertain stare. Cole crouched to her level. "You'll be safe inside," he said quietly. "I give you my word." Asha nodded and leaned her forehead against Nayeli's shoulder. The trust in her small gesture pressed heavily on Cole, more than he expected. He stood again. "I'll get the rifle ready. They won't ride past without stopping." Nayeli's voice remained composed. "He never rides past anything he believes is his." Cole paused before reaching for the rifle. "You're not his," he said plainly. "Not today. Not yesterday. Not ever." Nayeli's eyes flickered with something restrained, gratitude mixed with exhaustion, but she did not respond aloud. Cole checked the rifle with quick, practiced motions. He didn't load it fully, only chambered one round, enough to send a message if needed. He wasn't eager to kill anyone, but he wasn't about to let men drag a woman and her child off his land. He stepped outside again, standing at the edge of the porch. The riders had moved lower along the ridge, their silhouettes more defined now. 3 men, spaced apart, scanning the land below. One sat taller than the others, shoulders squared, posture tense with impatience. Cole understood immediately. That was the leader, the man Nayeli had fled from. The riders slowed. The lead horse shifted sideways, picking up the man's agitation. Cole felt a pulse of anger surface as he pictured the way Nayeli had described him: controlling, entitled, relentless. The men had not seen Cole yet. He stepped forward enough to be visible, making his presence known without acting provocative. The wind carried the sound of their horses snorting as they paused, noticing him. The leader tilted his head, studying Cole across the distance. Even from far away, Cole could sense the man's arrogance. He sat like someone who assumed people owed him answers. Cole didn't move. He didn't raise his weapon. He simply stood his ground. The leader leaned toward one of his men, muttered something, then pointed toward the cabin. Cole's muscles tensed. They had found a trail. Inside the house, Nayeli lifted Asha into her arms again and stood near the bed, listening for sounds outside. She didn't ask what was happening. She heard the shift in energy through the walls. Cole watched the riders begin their descent. Slow, steady, testing his reaction. He tightened his grip on the porch railing and inhaled once, deep and controlled. This wasn't the first time men with pride and weapons had come looking for a fight. But this was the first time in 6 years he had something to protect besides his land. And he would not let anyone take it. The riders reached the lower slope with a slow, deliberate descent, their horses kicking loose stones that scattered across the dirt. Cole stood motionless on the porch, watching their approach with a steady gaze. He kept his shoulders relaxed, hands open at his sides, though every muscle in his body remained ready to react if they crossed a line. The lead rider halted a few yards from the gate. He was tall, broad through the chest, with a trimmed beard and a hardened expression shaped by unchecked authority. His coat was dust-stained, his jaw set with a confidence that came from years of people stepping aside for him. He locked eyes with Cole, sizing him up. "You the man living here?" His voice carried the tone of someone used to getting answers on the first try. Cole didn't flinch. "I am." The rider looked past Cole toward the cabin window, scanning for movement. "We're tracking a woman and her brat. They came this way yesterday. You see them." Cole didn't move an inch. "You're on private land. State your business before you ask questions." The man smirked faintly. "My business is retrieving what belongs to me." Cole's jaw tightened. "No one on this land belongs to you." The rider leaned forward in the saddle, hands tightening on the reins. "You're going to answer the question one way or another. You seen them or not?" Cole's gaze remained cold and direct. "A woman and child passed through the river trail yesterday. That doesn't make them yours." The two men behind the leader exchanged looks, gripping their rifles more firmly. Tension thickened the air, settling over the yard like a slow-building storm. Inside the cabin, Nayeli held Asha against her chest, listening closely. She stepped away from the window, so she wouldn't be visible, her breathing steady but her hand trembling slightly. She knew that voice. She had heard it command others. She had heard it threaten her. She felt the old fear rise, but she pressed it down, focusing on Asha's heartbeat instead. Outside, the leader finally dismounted, his boots hitting the dirt with a dull thud. He stepped closer to the gate, ignoring Cole's warning distance. "I'll make this simple," he said. "The woman ran from responsibilities she doesn't get to choose. She's marked trouble on every path she walks. I'm here to bring her back." Cole stepped down from the porch, closing the distance between them with slow, measured steps. "If she left you, that was her choice. You don't get to ride onto my land and claim her as property." The leader's eyes hardened. "You don't understand how things work, friend." "I understand enough," Cole said, keeping his voice even. "You follow her because you think fear makes people stay." The man took another step forward, testing boundaries. "Doesn't matter why she left. She's mine to retrieve." Cole's hand rested lightly near his belt, not threatening, but ready. "This is your only warning. You turn around, you ride back, and you don't return." The leader exhaled a short, humorless laugh. "You think you could protect her?" His eyes narrowed with disdain. "You got no idea what that woman is capable of. She poisons people against good men. She lies. She runs. She causes nothing but grief." Cole's gaze sharpened. He recognized the type instantly. Men who twisted their failures into accusations, blaming anyone who refused to bow to them. "You talk like someone who lost control of a woman who learned to say no," Cole said quietly. The insult landed sharp and direct. The leader's nostrils flared. His hand twitched toward the pistol on his hip. Behind him, the other two riders shifted in their saddles, unsure whether they should prepare for a fight or wait for orders. Cole didn't raise his voice. He simply planted his boots firmly and met the man's stare without blinking. I won't say it again. Leave. The leader stepped forward until he was only a few feet from Cole, his voice dropping lower. You think standing here with a rifle in that cabin makes you brave? You don't know what she's done. You don't know what danger you're protecting. If she's dangerous, Cole said calmly, why does she run with a child she protects more fiercely than her own breath? The leader's jaw tightened. His expression fractured, just for a second, revealing a flicker of frustration. He refused to answer. Cole pressed the advantage. You chase her because you need to win. There's no justice in it, just power. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, and dangerous. Then the leader leaned forward. You're making a mistake, cowboy. A big one. Maybe, Cole said, but it's mine to make. The man pulled back slightly, reassessing the situation. Cole's stance, his refusal to show fear, the unmistakable conviction in his tone. It was enough to force hesitation. But then the leader's voice hardened again. Move aside. I'm searching that house. No, Cole said. One word. Flat. Immovable. The leader's hand drifted toward his gun. Before he could touch it, Cole's rifle clicked. Not raised, not pointed, but unmistakably ready. The sound cut through the air like a blade. The rider froze, eyes locked on Cole's hand. Cole didn't smile, didn't threaten, didn't move. He simply held the rifle low, angled at the ground, finger resting near the trigger with the confidence of someone who had survived too many confrontations to be intimidated by another. If you draw, Cole said quietly, you won't leave this yard. The two men on horseback shifted again, suddenly unsure of their leader's odds. The leader glared, weighing his pride against the reality in front of him. Cole wasn't bluffing. He knew a man's threshold for fear, and Cole had passed his years ago. Finally, the leader spat into the dirt. This isn't over. I didn't expect it to be, Cole replied. The man mounted his horse, jerking the reins hard. He signaled for his men to follow. They turned their horses and rode back toward the ridge, though slower this time, watching the cabin over their shoulders. Cole didn't move until they were barely visible against the horizon. When he finally turned toward the cabin, the door opened slightly. Nayeli stood there, Asha pressed to her shoulder, both watching him as if trying to read the outcome from his expression alone. Cole stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He didn't raise his voice, didn't exaggerate. They'll return, he said, but not today. Nayeli's breath escaped in a slow, controlled release. Part relief, part fear for what would come next. She set Asha down gently and approached Cole, her eyes studying the tension still lingering across his shoulders. You stood alone against them, she said. No, Cole answered softly. I stood with you. For the first time since arriving at his home, Nayeli looked at him without the barrier of caution. What he saw in her eyes wasn't dependence. It was recognition. The afternoon light thinned into a muted amber tone as the dust from the rider's departure finally settled over the yard. Cole closed the door firmly, sliding the bar into place with a slow, deliberate movement. The weight of the moment pressed across his shoulders, but he didn't allow it to show. He turned toward Nayeli, who stood near the hearth with Asha clinging to her leg, both watching him with unshielded tension. Asha broke first. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Cole's waist, surprising him with the suddenness of the gesture. Her small hands gripped his shirt tightly, as if she were trying to anchor herself to something solid. Cole froze for a beat, then slowly rested a hand on her back, gentling his stiff posture so she wouldn't feel the rigidity streaking through his muscles. Nayeli approached quietly and coaxed Asha back to her side, but her daughter kept one hand hooked around Cole's fingers. The connection wasn't forced, it was instinctive, honest. Cole didn't pull away. Nayeli studied him closely, absorbing every detail of his stance, the tension in his jaw, the slow, controlled breaths he drew as he tried to settle his mind. You didn't expect them to leave so easily, she said. Cole shook his head. Men like that don't give up because someone told them no. They give up only when something stops them. He lowered himself into a chair, rubbing a hand across his ribs as the ache flared again. They'll circle back. They'll test the land. They'll wait for a moment when they think I'm distracted. Nayeli lifted Asha into her arms, settling the child on her hip. Then we must decide what comes next. A quiet fell over the room. It wasn't empty. It was weighted with the understanding that today's confrontation had shifted their lives onto a new path. Cole leaned forward, elbows on his knees. If we stay here, we prepare. If you want to leave, I'll ride with you to make sure you pass safely through the canyon trails. Nayeli considered the options without rushing, her mind working with the precision of someone who had no luxury of making a wrong decision. If we leave, he will hunt us. If we stay, he will return here. She studied Cole carefully. Both paths put you in danger. Cole's response came without hesitation. You're already in danger. That doesn't change because I look away. Nayeli shifted her weight slightly, and Asha rested her head against her mother's shoulder. The child had stopped trembling, yet her hands remained tense, gripping Nayeli's dress with instinctive caution. You have built a life here, Nayeli said. I do not want to endanger what you have left. Cole's gaze drifted toward the window. Beyond it, the field stretched quiet and open, the land he had worked for years after losing everything else. This place stopped being a life the day my family died, he said, voice low. Since then, it's been routine. Nothing more. Nayeli watched him silently, recognizing the candor he rarely revealed. She stepped closer, setting Asha gently on her feet. You protected us today, she said. Not because of any law, not because of obligation, because you chose to. Cole met her eyes. I did. She held his gaze for a long moment, then shifted her attention back to the immediate threat. He will return with anger, not patience. He will bring more men if he feels humiliated. Cole nodded. That's why we decide now how to meet him. Asha tugged at Nayeli's sleeve. Mama, will he hurt Cole? Nayeli crouched to meet her daughter's eyes. Not if we stay together, she answered softly. Not if we prepare. Cole knelt beside them, lowering himself slowly to avoid pulling at the soreness in his ribs. Asha, he said quietly, I won't let anyone take you. Or your mother. His voice held a gravity that made the child straighten slightly, absorbing the promise without questioning it. Asha nodded and pressed her palm against Cole's knee before slipping back into her mother's arms. Nayeli stood. What do you need me to do? Cole rose as well, bracing himself against the table. We reinforce the west side. If they approach again, it'll likely be from that direction. They'll want cover, and that path gives them some. Nayeli tied her hair back with a leather string and stepped toward the door. Then we start now. Outside, the sun hovered low but still bright, casting long shadows across the yard. Cole brought out planks, rope, and tools, placing them in an organized row against the cabin wall. Nayeli moved with efficiency, hauling wood with steady arms and tying knots that held tight under tension. Asha sat on the porch steps, wrapped in a blanket, watching them with a mixture of caution and fascination. She didn't complain, didn't speak much, but tracked every motion with alert eyes. Cole noted how quickly she adapted to understanding danger, too quickly for a child her age. They worked without wasted movement. Cole built a cross brace along the outer wall, hammering nails while Nayeli secured the rope in complex, reinforced patterns that prevented the boards from shifting. When Cole stepped back to inspect her work, he found the knots precise and strong. You've done this before, he said. Nayeli wiped sweat from her forehead. I've had to secure shelters in storms. Wind teaches discipline. Cole felt a small, quiet respect deepen inside him. Not for her survival, but for the calm she maintained through every test. She never panicked. She never froze. She adapted and moved forward. For a moment, they worked side by side without speaking. When they reached the final section, Cole exhaled slowly. After today, things will change for all of us. Nayeli paused, gripping the rope between her fingers. I know, we can't return to how things were, Cole said. Your life and mine, they've crossed paths in a way that doesn't unbind. Nayeli met his gaze evenly. I did not expect them to. He didn't look away. I won't let you walk into danger alone. Nayeli stepped closer, her voice steady. And I won't leave unless you tell me to. The moment hung between them. Not romantic, not forced, but formed from shared necessity and growing trust. Then Asha called out from the porch. Mama, Cole, look. They turned quickly. A lone figure stood on the far ridge, barely visible against the fading sky. Not moving, just watching. Cole felt the muscles in his back tighten, his instincts sharpening immediately. Naeli stepped beside him, her breath drawing in quietly but firmly. The figure remained still for several long seconds, then disappeared over the ridge. Cole's voice dropped to a low, hard certainty. They're scouting. Next time, they won't stop at watching. Naeli didn't respond. She already knew. Evening settled over the land with a slow descent, the last streaks of daylight fading into a muted blue that wrapped the cabin in an uneasy calm. The temperature dropped sharply, pushing a thin chill through the yard. Cole lit the lantern inside, its glow stretching across the wooden floorboards in long, steady lines. He double-checked the locks on the windows, testing each one with quiet, deliberate pressure. Asha sat on the bed, clutching the blanket around her shoulders while watching him with wide, alert eyes. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Children understood danger in instinctive ways adults sometimes ignored. Naeli sat beside her, one hand resting on the girl's back, the other absently tracing the hem of her dress. She held her expression steady, but tension showed in the way she kept her jaw tight. Cole placed the rifle on the table, not within reach of the child, but close enough for him to use quickly. He didn't like the idea of violence entering his home, but denial would help no one. The riders hadn't come for negotiation. They had come with ownership in their eyes. The kind of man rarely left twice without taking what he believed was owed. Naeli watched Cole for several moments before speaking. "You're expecting them tonight?" "No," Cole replied, adjusting the lantern. "I'm expecting them at dawn. Men like that prefer to strike when others are still waking." Naeli nodded slowly. "He will try to catch you off guard." "He'll fail," Cole said, not boastfully but with a grounded certainty. "We'll be ready." Asha shifted closer to Naeli, leaning into her side. "Mama, will we stay here?" she whispered. Naeli brushed her daughter's hair back gently. "Tonight, yes. Tomorrow, we will see what the morning brings." Asha glanced at Cole, searching his face as though trying to confirm her mother's words. Cole knelt so they would be on the same level. "I told you I would keep you safe," he said quietly. "That hasn't changed." Asha nodded, though her fingers trembled. Naeli watched the exchange with a look Cole hadn't seen before. Something steady, grateful, and slightly vulnerable beneath the discipline she tried to maintain. "You speak to her like she matters," Naeli said. Cole stood. "Because she does." Silence settled between them, grounded and heavy, but not cold. Naeli rose from the bed, lifting Asha so the child could lie down fully beneath the blanket. She tucked the girl in with slow, careful patience. When Asha's breathing shifted into the shallow rhythm of light sleep, Naeli stepped toward the table, stopping across from Cole. "She will ask questions if I fall apart," Naeli said quietly. "So I cannot." Cole shook his head. "You haven't fallen apart. You've held steady through everything." Naeli exhaled, the sound low and controlled. "I left because I would not raise her under a man who saw her as a burden. That choice made enemies. I knew they would follow. I just hoped we would find a place before they did." "You did," Cole said. "You found my land." Naeli studied him closely, searching for insincerity. She found none. Cole leaned his knuckles against the table. "I've been alone a long time, and I learned something in the years after my family died. Facing danger alone is survival. Facing it with others, that's something different." Naeli understood what he meant, though neither of them said the words aloud. After a moment, she asked, "What will you do when he returns?" Cole didn't answer immediately. He moved to the window and peered through the narrow gap. The moon was rising, giving him just enough light to see the darker shapes of the hills. Nothing moved yet. He turned back to her. "I'll talk first," he said. Men like him always believe they can intimidate their way through a problem. When he sees that won't work, he'll show his intentions clearly. "And if talking fails?" Naeli asked, her voice steady. "Then I'll do what's necessary," Cole replied. "I won't let him take either of you." Naeli's breath hitched, not in fear, but in the weight of someone finally standing with her rather than against her. She stepped closer, not reaching for him, but closing the space enough that her voice lowered into something personal. My people's law binds a man who saves a child, she said. But that law was always meant to honor action, not force commitment. Today you protected us because it was right, not because you were obligated. Cole met her gaze. I don't follow a law I don't know. I follow what makes sense to live with. Protecting you both makes sense to me. For a moment, she didn't look away. She stood straight, nearly eye level with him in the dim lantern glow. Then she nodded once, a simple but meaningful gesture. I believe you, she said. Cole felt the words settle deeper than he expected. The wind picked up outside, brushing loose dust across the porch. Cole walked to the door and checked the bar again. Nayeli extinguished the smaller lantern, leaving only the main one lit. Together they prepared the cabin for the night's watch. Cole near the door, Nayeli beside the hearth where she could reach Asha quickly if needed. Hours passed. The night grew quieter, colder. Cole remained awake, listening for the slightest break in the stillness. Hoofbeats, a creak in the wood, the shift of air that came when riders moved close. A lifetime of hard memories shaped his vigilance. Nayeli stayed alert, her posture controlled, her breathing slow. She did not sleep either. She watched Cole with the same quiet intensity she used when tracking danger in the wild. And for the first time since arriving at his home, she allowed herself to sit near him, not across the room. At one point, Asha murmured in her sleep. Nayeli rose to adjust the blanket, smoothing the child's hair before returning to her place beside the fire. Cole glanced toward her. You can rest, he said softly. I'll keep watch. I know you will, Nayeli replied, sitting again. But I will not sleep while a fight waits outside. Cole respected that. He didn't argue. The night stretched on, heavy with anticipation. Then, just before the first line of gray touched the sky, Cole heard it. A distant echo of hooves. Slow at first, then clearer. He rose from his chair with a controlled inhale, gripping the rifle. Nayeli stood, lifting Asha into her arms before the child even stirred. Cole looked toward the window, eyes narrowing as the sound grew louder. They're coming, he said. Nayeli tightened her hold on her daughter. The moment every choice had been building toward was no longer approaching. It was already here. The sky held a faint gray light when the riders finally appeared at the crest of the ridge. Cole stood at the window, watching their silhouettes form into clear shapes as they moved down the slope in a tight formation. The sound of hooves carried through the cold morning air, controlled, deliberate, unhurried. This time they weren't scouting. They were committed. Nayeli stood near the bed with Asha tucked in her arms, ready to shield the girl from whatever might follow. She held her breath for a moment, grounding herself before whispering something calm into her daughter's ear. Asha wrapped her arms around her mother's neck and buried her face into the familiar warmth. Cole turned from the window and lifted the rifle from the table. He checked the chamber with quick precision, then placed the weapon against his shoulder. His breathing stayed even, his expression sharpened with clarity rather than fear. Years of pain had shaped him, but this decision did not confuse him. Protecting them felt right in a way nothing else had since his family died. Nayeli stepped forward as he reached for the door. You do not stand outside alone, she said, her voice steady. Cole shook his head. If they see you with me, they'll use it against us. Stay inside. Lock the door. Keep Asha behind you. Nayeli held his gaze firmly. I will be ready if anything changes. Cole gave a short nod. That's enough. He stepped outside, closing the door behind him with controlled quiet. The cold hit him immediately, sharp against his skin, but he welcomed the clarity it brought. He walked off the porch and planted himself in the center of the yard, positioning his feet firmly in the dirt, rifle lowered but ready. The three riders halted several yards away. The leader sat upright in the saddle, face clouded with anger he no longer hid. He dismounted without breaking eye contact, boots scraping across the ground as he approached the gate. You made a fool of me yesterday, the man said, voice low and hard. I don't let that stand. Cole remained still. You don't belong on this land. The man paced forward slowly, hands twitching with uncontrolled agitation. She ran from what was hers to answer for. You sheltered her. You interfered. Cole tightened his grip on the rifle. She left because she chose her daughter over you. That was her right. The man scoffed, shoulders rising in irritation. You think she's innocent? You think she didn't lie to you already? Women like her twist men into fools. I'm done chasing her. Now I'm taking what should have never been allowed to run. Cole's voice stayed quiet, but carried unmistakable force. You're not taking anything. The man stopped walking, his expression turning sharp. You want to die for her? Fine. He reached for his gun. Cole reacted instantly. He raised a rifle only halfway, not to fire but to assert control. The click of the hammer locking back echoed through the yard with a clarity that froze everyone for a split second. The two riders behind the leader stiffened, hands hesitating over their weapons. Don't, Cole said. The leader bared his teeth in a humorless mockery of a smile. You won't shoot. Cole's voice didn't rise. Try me. The threat landed. The leader faltered, not out of fear of death, but from the shock that someone finally refused to cower under his authority. He had built his power on intimidation, not on true strength. Cole's stillness broke through his confidence in ways he hadn't anticipated. Then the cabin door opened. Nayeli stepped out, holding Asha close. Her posture was straight, her steps controlled. She didn't run to Cole. She placed herself several paces behind him, giving him the space to lead while showing the riders she was no longer hiding. The leader turned toward her with fury rising fast. You brought this on yourself, he shouted. You could have come back quietly. You forced this. Nayeli lifted her chin. I left because you wanted to control us. My daughter will not grow under a man who sees her as a burden. The man stepped forward, rage overtaking reason. I fed you. I gave you shelter. You repay me by running. You call protection what was actually ownership, Nayeli said. I owe you nothing. Her voice didn't crack. It was steady, grounded, decisive. Cole shifted slightly, placing himself more firmly between them. The leader snapped. He reached for his pistol fully this time, the intention clear. Cole lifted the rifle, but before a single shot fired, the other two riders moved. Enough, one muttered, dropping his hand from his gun. This isn't worth blood. The second rider tightened his grip on the reins. She doesn't want you. Let go. The leader spun toward them, furious. You take her side? We're not dying for your pride, the second rider answered. Their refusal broke the last piece of leverage he thought he had. The leader turned back toward Cole and Nayeli, hatred burning in his eyes, but he no longer had support. He realized it in the silence behind him. He hesitated, choking on anger he couldn't direct anywhere. Finally, he spat into the dirt. Keep her. Keep the brat. Both of you will regret this. Cole steadied his rifle. Ride. Don't look back. The man glared one last time and climbed onto his horse. He jerked the reins and rode hard toward the ridge, disappearing behind the rise without another word. The two remaining riders turned quietly and followed him, neither glancing back at the cabin. Cole lowered the rifle gradually, letting the moment settle. Nayeli let out a breath she had held too tightly, her shoulders easing as Asha clung to her side. She stepped toward Cole slowly, each movement controlled as if the weight of disbelief hadn't fully released yet. Asha reached for Cole's hand without hesitation. He took it gently. Nayeli watched their hands clasp, her expression softening with something deep and fully unguarded. It is done, she said quietly. Cole nodded. It's over. Nayeli stepped closer. You stood with us, not because the law demanded it, because you chose to. Cole met her eyes. That law of yours, maybe it wasn't just tradition. Maybe it was a way of naming something real. Nayeli held his gaze for a long moment, then spoke in a voice that carried the strength of final decision. If you accept the bond, we stay. We build a life here with you. If you do not, we leave with gratitude, knowing what you risked for us. Cole looked at Asha, then at Nayeli again. The weight of the moment didn't frighten him. It settled into place like something long delayed. You belong here, he said. Both of you. Nayeli's breath trembled, not from fear, but from the release of carrying too much alone for too long. She placed her free hand over Cole's chest, grounding the moment between them. Asha hugged Cole's waist tightly, anchoring all three into a family the river had started but choice had completed. Cole placed a hand over Naeli's, steady and firm. "We start together," he said. Naeli nodded, warmth settling into her expression. "Then we stay." The morning sun broke across the ridge, lighting the yard with a new, clean brightness. For the first time in years, Cole felt his home shift from empty routine to something alive. Not because he saved a child, but because he chose them, and they chose him.